afternoon and good day. Welcome to another edition of Sales TV Live. Today, we're encouraging you to think like a toddler and outthink your competition. I'm joined by Mike Macioci with a journey from the IBM mailroom to becoming a long-tenured sales representative and trainer with the organization. Mike brings a wealth of knowledge, experience, and a unique perspective of sales effectiveness. Mike, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm always, always wanted to be on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. So this is the
next best thing. There you go. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about you, your journey in sales, and where you are today.
Yeah, so I spent most of my career, except for the first 7 or 8 years, which I was actually started in the mailroom and did a lot of moved on to a lot of technical jobs, then got into technical sales, and then spent about 25 years or so in a variety of different sales roles, both with customers and as well as through the channel, which is a kind of a separate discipline, right? Because you're selling to people who sell versus selling to people who buy. So it's a totally different perspective. And then I retired about 2014, 2015. I started doing some sales coaching and spent about 9 years now. I've been focusing on that and have the opportunity to work with some really talented coaches as well as some really talented learners who are trying to improve their sales skills, both experienced ones as well as ones just starting out.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that. So, Mike, I want to jump right into it. Good. What do you mean when you say think like a toddler?
Well, if you look at toddlers, that's where the human being really learns percentage-wise the most amount in their development, right? And they're driven by this incessant, and I got grandchildren that age, so I know it, incessant curiosity. They always want to know why. If they don't understand something, they still want to know maybe even more so. And so the principle behind this, and there was a chapter in the book I wrote, was that if you have that childlike curiosity and you combine it with adult intelligence, you can be a much more effective seller.
So I want to dig into that a little bit. How can adopting a toddler's mindset be advantageous in sales and customer service?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to motivation. It's critical to understand what is motivating a client, a prospect, customer to take an action. So if you are able to understand their motivations, what's causing them to think and feel the way they do, you can help influence their actions. And that really gets down to being able to get to root causes of things, right? And ask those why questions, right? Whether you use the word why or not, but really understand why does somebody want to do something? Why do they feel this way? And then you can adjust it. You can, adjust the way they view things because now you're quote unquote in their head, right?
Okay. Can you give us some examples of why questions? Because if I think about it and I simply ask why, that might seem confrontational. And I don't think you're advocating for confrontational at all.
Correct. Then you turn it into an interrogation, right? Right. So, so for example, if you have, let's say you're trying to get a client who hasn't really worked with your company before, and they explain that, when they look at the marketplace, we don't see you as a leading contender in this particular niche, let's say. So now you can, the way, one trap you can fall into the sales rep is get defensive and start challenging them, explaining to them how, we won this award, we got these men, this kind of market share, so on and so forth, rather than getting into understanding, why they think that way. Now, you don't necessarily have to use the word why. You kind of want to understand, you could ask the question, like this, when you shared your opinion with me of this, that we're not someone you think is a preferred vendor in this area. Can you explain to me what would you be looking for in a vendor, right, that you consider top tier, or who do you consider top tier, so you can kind of get into understanding why they came up with that reason, and also, many times, there are, with clients, there are personal reasons for doing things, and there are sometimes quote unquote business reasons for doing that. So sometimes you want to probe more deeply and find out, from a personal perspective, why is it that they take a certain position.
And in your experience, what are the most common obstacles sales professionals face when they're trying to adopt this more, I'll call it, cognitive approach to selling?
Yeah, I think what they get into is they look at things through their own eyes, right? You could take an example, value, right? Oftentimes, sellers, we all fall into this. I've done it too. I'm sure you have. We assign a value to maybe a certain feature or function that we have in our offering, and we fight for recognition that from the customer, rather than trying to understand from the customer how do they assign value, right? I mean, a perfect example is risk, right? Everybody defines risk differently. So what may appear risky to you, or what may appear not risky to a seller, may appear very risky to a client, because everybody got their own perception. I mean, I remember about a year or two ago, I was driving around. And I noticed a person on the motorcycle next to me, very loud motorcycle, with a mask on. And this was about a year or so after COVID. It was an open road, nobody there. I didn't think anything of it. And then I saw the same person about 3 days later, still had the mask on. And then I'm thinking, something's funny about this. And what's funny about it, had no helmet. So again, just the way this person assigned more risks of getting COVID than in potentially, sliding on a slick road on a motorcycle. That's just their perception. So you need to understand that first if you're ever going to change someone's view of anything. How do they arrive at that understanding?
So as you're coaching salespeople to take this more toddler-like approach, but truly this more cognitive approach to it, how is this impacting the way they sell going forward? Are they able to, first of all, recognize the value in this, and second, adopt more of these behaviors?
Well, I think that, and that's why I wrote the chapter in the book to kind of illustrate that, is that once you have this bias for curiosity, right? You're trying to understand. You tend to assume less, because as salespeople, there's that tendency to always want to assume. It's human nature, right? So you really need to be able to put that aside and keep asking those questions that are going to get to you the insight. Why is a customer thinking the way they're thinking? right? Because all the way I look at it, I'm personally, as a personal opinion, I'm a fan of the think, feel, and act uh, framework, which basically says that your actions are driven by your feelings, but your feelings are driven by your thinking. So as sales reps, your job is to influence the customer's actions. In order to do that, you need to be able to, influence their feelings, which means you have to go back and understand how they think, and most importantly, why they think the way they do. Because then, when I started out in sales, and the saying was, walk in the customer's shoes, put you're getting the customer's head, and it's really just kind of saying the same thing. Just get their perspective, which means you have to be able to listen, get them to talk, and sometimes when you do that, you'll find that a client will maybe discover something on their own with you that they didn't know before, just because you asked the right questions. I mean, I've had that happen to me as a person buying things, right? As a consumer, sometimes you sit down with someone, a sales rep, and they're really good at getting you to understand things you never really understood before. And that's value. And those are the people you want to work with, right?
Excellent. Yeah. Changing gears a little bit, how can sales leaders encourage their teams to embrace this more cognitive approach towards selling?
Well, I think the way I look at it is that if I'm running a sales organization, I would take the position. Look, all our competitors are challenges for us. Got to accept that, right? Can't take them for granted. Customers have options, so we need to be out there and making sure that we understand them better than the competition, right? Because other your competition some could have more money, some could have a better brand identity. Some could have better relationships than you, but the only thing you have as a sales rep that that gives you the competitive advantage is your ability to outthink the competition, right? And if you go with the principle that your mind is, you only use 20, 30, 40% of your brain, you hear all those numbers going around, it's an untapped resource. So that is really your competitive advantage. Can you outthink the competition? And being curious is one way to build that foundation. And then you got to obviously do something with the curiosity, right? And take action. So,
and how can leaders foster that curiosity? Is there something they can do in their leadership style, a change they could make?
Well, I think all leaders, and you could really take this beyond just sales leaders, but any type of leaders. I think there's two things. Number one, this servant leader mentality. I mean, you're there to really serve the people under you, to make them more effective, because that makes you more effective. The second thing is to use the same approach, right? And to have a more of a coaching style with employees, instead of me saying, Rob, your pipeline doesn't look good. Go fix it and come back to me with your plan next week. I may want to talk to you and try to understand why that is, right? And that will allow us to diagnose what you, I, or somebody else can collectively do to resolve that, move those obstacles out of the way. So I think that, you guys sometimes, you really need to set an example by doing that, right? Rather than just throw some empty words at people to get them to go sell more, right?
so much of selling these days is done in a virtual environment. Does this approach still work when I'm not face to face in the same room, reading your body language and so on?
I always thought, personally, my opinion is virtual selling is harder than face-to-face selling. Now, obviously, it has advantages because you can, you can get in front of people more quickly than, if people are geographically dispersed and you want to have a talk over proposal. It may take a week or two or three to get all the schedules and wind up getting them in the same place, where you can just do it, today on a web call. So I think that it has its own unique challenges, but the basics are the same. I mean, you're trying to have a meaningful conversation with someone, and your curiosity really is what's going to help bring out value in that discussions. So when you finish that conversation, right, you have a clear understanding of that client's point of view on things, really why they're doing things, and now you can better able to talk about your specific point of view on things, right? Which invariably is, I want you to buy from me. So,
Yeah.
but now you got something to base that on, right? Based on what they said, using, for example, as I said before, using their definition of risk versus your definition of risk, right?
So you've been at sales for a while, by your own admission.
Mm.
What are some key differences you've observed in customer behavior and expectations now versus when you started in sales? And just as importantly, how can sales professionals today adapt to that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A tremendous amount of changes. I would say the biggest one is the change in the buyer's journey, right? It's gone from where, especially, I'm not talking business to business, but especially more complex the technology is, right? Years ago, as the seller, you were the guardian of all the information, right? Because how would the customer really find out anything about your product or offering unless it was from you? Now they could just Google it, right? Right? They can go in and say, John Smith from ABC Company's calling on me. What 5 questions can I ask them about their product that would help me? So, they are so self-sufficient nowadays during the buying journey that the skill level of sales reps need to be much higher than they were 5 years ago. Every seems like it keeps going up every year.
Yeah,
Eventually, until you're 34. But I also say that the other place that's changed is we never had the tools years ago, right? Than people have now. So it's very incumbent upon sellers, whether experienced or not, to explore these productivity tools, whether it's AI, whether it's just having a really strong LinkedIn profile. Because if I was calling on you, 30 years ago, I would have to call up a bunch of people and say, "Hey, who's this guy, Rob? I haven't met him yet. What can you tell me about him?" I have to get my phone list out, go make calls. Now, and then by the way, some of the time, and they missed up Rob Durant with Joe Durant, so it gave me the wrong information. Now I can go on LinkedIn and I can research you, and I can find out this. Maybe we have a contact in common. Maybe you went to the same school I did, right? And we got a connection. So those tools exist, and they have to be embraced, regardless of whether you're new or experienced. And I think AI is the next, taking it the next step forward. Clearly, not just in a lot of areas, but especially in terms of selling.
So we have time for one more question. I want to bring it really basic.
Okay.
What are the things that we should do, and just as importantly, things we should not do in sales?
Hey, I think, by the way, I just wrote a book on that, which is not out yet.
Oh.
But yeah, so I had a while back, I had somebody I was, just helping out as a friend, a favor to a friend, coaching them, a new seller. And they said, Mike, you're going to be really great. Why? All the stuff we learn, when I'm reading books and, going to class on sales, it'd be great if there was like a handbook they gave you. You do this and not do that. And I said, not really. It doesn't work that way. It's got to get it through experience. But I was thinking about it and said, well, it'd be a good idea for a book, right? To focus on best practices that can be done instead of worst practices, for lack of a better term. So, a couple of the things that I came up with is, number one, anticipate more, assume less. Now, people kind of bundle those words together. They do both start with A, but there are totally different things, right? Because when you assume, you're taking for granted that something is true, but it may not be. When you anticipate, you are really trying to plan for the possibility that this is the case, and you have a plan to action. It also forces you to keep understanding from the client, right? Rather than me assume you're a CIO and you care about these things, I can anticipate that, but I can't assume that, because you may have a totally different view than another CIO for whatever reason, right? The other thing was objections, which is like one of my favorite subjects. It was really about loving objections and not fearing them. What I was taught when I started to get into sales was, they said, Mike, you don't get objections, you're not going to sell anything. So, don't get bent out of shape when you get an objection. This is a good thing, because that's when the selling begins, when the customer says no. Right. So in the chapter, I kind of write about having that mindset, which is really important, but also, what do you do with that mindset? What things can you do to take objections and really turn them into an advantage for you? Right. Because every client has objections, but you want to find out earlier rather than later.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you find out earlier, you can address them. And the other thing was really about this whole concept, which I think we talked about, ties into being a toddler. So if they really don't listen more, so maybe not. But right. So it's listen more and talk less, right? But then we talk about what things you want to talk about, right? And why is it important to follow that mantra? You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And if you look at some of the studies and the out there, it's very. I thought it's fascinating that when they interview B2B buyers and then they interview B2B sellers, and they ask the same questions on their views on B2B sellers, the sellers will say we do a really good job of listening to our clients, and the buyers say one of the things they don't do really well is listen.
Yeah.
Right? Again, it's my business as a client. It's my business. I know my business, right? You know your offering. So understand my business. Once you do that, then you can better articulate to me your offering. And so that's kind of the premise of the book, is to focus on those best practices I see really good salespeople incorporate, and the ones they didn't, ones that have bad habits that they've want to get away from, and we all have them, right? It's human nature, because one of the things I learned from coaching is I can go back and look through all the sales reps I worked with in the last 35 years, the things I did, and I could tell, I could say, Rob, he was a great sales rep. Why? Well, because he had great customer relationships, or he sold a lot. Now I can look at that same person, whole different set of eyes. I can tell you what attributes he had, what things he specifically did to become successful. Things at that time I just didn't, I just didn't notice.
Right.
Just the way it is.
Mike, this has been great. How can people learn more, and where can they get in touch with you?
I'm on LinkedIn because I follow you a lot, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to engage, and I appreciate the time. Also encourage people. I did this. I look back on some of the previous episodes of Sales TV Live. So you may want to, I think you got a couple of years worth out there now.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So people may want to sort through and see which ones of interest, but I ran into a couple I thought was a pretty engaging conversation.
Well, thank you for saying that. So to our audience, we now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, be on the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen or visit us at SalesTV.live and click on newsletter. This has been another edition of Sales TV Live. On behalf of myself and everyone at Sales TV, Mike, and to our audience, thank you for being an active part of today's conversation.